So this video and the next video are part of our Chapter 1 from the SSIS 2008 course here at Learn It First. However, the videos are going to be recorded so that you can watch these independent of the rest of the chapter. And the reason I did this was that there may be people coming in and watching only portions of our SSIS 2008 course. They may not need to know every little feature. They may not need to know the what's new in SSIS 2008. They may not need to know an absolute introduction like we went through a little bit earlier. So this and the next video is meant to just be taken a la carte, if you will. You're welcome to just watch these and shoot straight on to chapter 4 if that's what you really need to get into. So we're going to talk about in this video and the next one the common terms that we all need to know if we're going to work with SSIS. And there are a ton of them. There's a lot of these terms. However, I will say if you have experience with SSIS or with data warehousing maybe, then these are probably terms you know. You might even be able to skip this video and go into the next section if you want to, what's new. Now at the beginning of the next section of what's new, it says, well, if you don't need to know what's new, then go straight to chapter 2. So if you're not upgrading from SSIS 2005, for example, you don't need to watch the what's new section. You could straight go to chapter 2. You'd be fine. So from this point forward, I assume you want to know about the common terms and concepts that we have to be familiar with to be in the SSIS environment. So there's a ton of them here. You could see some of them here: deduplication, the staging. There's lots of different terms. I'm going to try to walk you through as many of these as I can, including a description and what they are. If you didn't have this video and you just jumped into the course, you'd probably be able to figure it out as we went along. But I think this video will serve as, for some people, a primer into what these concepts are. And then when we hit them later in the course, just be pounding it into your brain a little better. The repetition will help you remember that a little bit more. So let's just go ahead and get started here. I grouped these together. This is me. This is not coming from like a documentation thing here. I think of the common terms that we have to know in terms of these categories. Several of the terms are just industry terms. Some of the terms are from the Microsoft world, like reporting services. That's a specific product in the Microsoft world. Some of the terms, a lot of the terms actually, are going to be around the data warehousing world. And that could kind of also maybe be an industry term, data warehousing. I don't know. But and then database design, there's only going to be a few of those that we're going to cover here. If you got into analysis services and other pieces, you'd need to know a few more. So I tell you what, I'm going to start first with that ubiquitous term, that buzzword for the past 5 years, business intelligence. Let's just kind of talk about what business intelligence is, and from there we'll just dig down and work with those 4 different categories that we talked about. Now, I did struggle. Let me just say this. I struggled with putting down onto paper, what is BI and how does it relate? Because BI means so many things to so many different people. Business intelligence is going to mean something different to a database manager than it's going to mean to a CEO or a COO. So I kind of struggled with a couple of these definitions, and I will say this, and I know I've said this in, if not this course, in other courses before. Don't let one person only be your guide for critical pieces like this. Like, I'm going to tell you my definition and what I think business intelligence is, but that doesn't mean that that's what business intelligence is. It means that in my experience, that's what I think it is, and that's what I've learned that it is. However, you may have a better definition from someone else, or it may behoove you to go out and collect a bunch of different definitions and kind of aggregate those and make a soup out of all that to where you come up with your own version. The important thing is that you understand what it is and you can have intelligent conversations about it. Not that you've taken one person's dogma and made that the way that you think. So a lot of these terms, I will encourage you, go get some more information and look those up. And I think that's just good advice for a lot of things, really. So anyway, I use this as an umbrella term, business intelligence. This is the various tools, ideas, and techniques, kind of like what I listed here, the various tools, ideas, and technique that allow us to make better decisions. Okay? And by us, that could be managers, it could be C-level folks. You know what I mean when I say C-level? CEO, COO, for example, CTO, chief, okay, C-level. Executives, managers. You really want to be able to make better decisions. That's what business intelligence is really all about. Now, I tried to put this into a pithy little statement that we could sort of rally the next two slides around, and this is what I came up with. We need to help our organization make informed decisions quickly and with consensus. Okay, so we probably can understand that business intelligence is going to help us make informed decisions. I think most of us could agree that the faster we can make quality decisions, informed decisions, then the better to outmaneuver our competitors as a company, for example. But the consensus part is a little bit dodgy. The consensus part might be the area where you could kind of pull back and say, wait a minute, what does that have to do with anything? Well, it may not. It depends on the organization you're working in. But in most organizations, you have a series of what I'll call stakeholders. And I don't mean like steak from a dead cow. I mean steak like you'd stab in a vampire's heart, right? It's just a steak, right? A stakeholder. Right? These are the people who matter, who have to be sold on something so that they have sign off. Now we're getting into a lot of feel-good business, corporate, etc. words, stakeholders and sign off, right? I'm not going to go into the fuzzy type stuff like that. But in the real world, in the boardroom, in a management meeting, in a C-level meeting, whatever you're thinking of here, you have various stakeholders. And it's your job to sell your ideas, and it's your job to get sign off on those ideas, to get them, to win them over, to bring people into your corner. So you have to be able to build consensus on a team if you want to achieve something meaningful. So by being able to make informed decisions quickly, that's one aspect of it, but you need to be able to build consensus. And here's where this kind of comes into play. If we have, let's just pick 10 people. So we have 10 people and we've got to get sign off on all 10. It's either a unanimous decision, so it's all we get everybody, or one dissenter kills the whole project. Well, imagine that out of those 10 people, we've got some C-level people, some executive VPs, a few high-level managers. And this is a very technical company. And the CEO, for example, was an ex-SQL developer who can write some very, very fancy queries. And he's got a copy of the database. He's got access to it. He can write his own reports if he needs to. And he digs down and he starts writing all this SQL code to come back with these fancy numbers that he says. He takes that to the meeting and he pulls up his laptop and he puts it on the projector and shows how he's writing this code and showing people just a grid, just like you'd see in the management studio or some other query-based tool. Is that how you build consensus? It might be. Okay, I've been in lots of those meetings where we say, okay, well, can you add this into the where clause? And now can you sort it by this? And then everybody sees it and then you get this aha moment and it works out. But a lot of times, I'm not going to name the organization types here, but a lot of organizations, that is very off-putting. I don't want to see the underlying details. I want to see pretty charts. I want to see arrows. I want to see green and red and yellow. I want to see fancy. And if you don't show me fancy, I'm not buying into it. Okay? Because I don't think it's going to work. So that consensus side of things, you're going to have to figure that part of it out. I mean, each organization has its own culture. But from a consensus standpoint, we need a single point to make our data, and we often need to make it pretty, a la reports, drill downs, cubes, things like that. So we need a single point of data that we all can agree upon is the actual data, and we need to be able to bring back the facts so that we can make those informed decisions, right? So sorry to spend so much time, but it's a pretty big concept that we need to understand to go forward. Now, so BI is really a hot term, not just now, but really for the past 5 to 10 years. It's so easy to sell. Like if you write BI software, enterprise software, and you go to a company and you say, would you be interested if we could show you a way to save $10 million dollars a year and we'll only charge you $1 million a year to do it? Well, that's an easy sell. It's a net savings of $9 million a year. Of course, I want to learn about that. And that's what making informed decisions quickly and with consensus can do for an organization. So it's an important term. Microsoft recognized how popular this was many, many years ago. And so that's what kind of we're doing here today. We're learning about business intelligence. SSIS is part of Microsoft's business intelligence strategy. I don't know what the technical term would be here, but so a lot of what we do with integration services is directly or indirectly business intelligence related. You might be populating data warehouses. You might be doing a lot of data quality work, data scrubbing, data cleansing, data validation, garbage in, garbage out, right? So let's take a look now. Let's kind of shift and let's go through the categories of them here. Let's start with the Microsoft specific terms. I'm going to spend the least amount of time on this because this is ones you should know already. SQL Server is a Microsoft term. The only thing I'll say about the term SQL Server is depending on how it's used, you could either be talking about the database engine or you could be talking about that whole suite of Microsoft SQL Server products. Like it just depends. If I said, well, just go install SQL Server and get everything up and running. That's somewhat of an ambiguous phrase, right? I mean, does that mean that he wants to install analysis services too, or reporting services, or integration services, or just the SQL Server component? Okay, so you need to be comfortable with what that is. Reporting services is the nice fancy report builder that ships with the SQL Server suite. I'll probably refer to that later as SSRS. Analysis services is our data warehousing product that comes with SQL Server, SSAS. You might or might not be familiar with DTS. Those of you that are migrating from older versions of SQL Server are likely to be very familiar with DTS. This is the history of SQL Server right here. In SQL Server 7.0, they came out with data transformation services. And that lasted through the next version of SQL 2000. But then they just simply changed the name in 2005, okay, to SSIS. I know we mentioned that in some earlier videos there. .NET, you need to be familiar with that. We're going to cover some of the .NET in Chapter 7 a little bit later in the course. This is the Microsoft framework here for programming languages. One that a lot of people are not familiar with, but you may have seen, is WMI, Windows Management Instrumentation. We're going to cover this in our chapter on the tour of the tasks in Chapter 4. But basically, from an SSIS developer, what we can do with this is we can actually look for things in the environment. So depending on how many processors there are, for example, I could make a decision inside of SSIS. Or I could say that once memory reaches below 10%, I want this task to go. Or when this task kicks off, if there's only 10% free operating system memory, then I want to wait until we have 80% free or some other number, and then I want to continue. So we can make decisions based on what's going on in the operating system. Right? Again, more on that in Chapter 4 when we get into our tour of the tasks. Now, the Management Studio, we'll touch on this. This will be more of our query writing, and we'll use this more of an exploratory tool. SSIS's development environment, the Visual Studio, isn't going to give us a in my opinion, as nice of an environment to view the database as the management studio. So I'm going to use that pretty often. The profiler, an essential tool for an SSIS developer when you're working with SQL Server based packages. You want to know exactly what's going on, what is being submitted to your system. This is a handy troubleshooting tool. It creates traces. A trace is a view of those incoming commands. So that'll be handy to do troubleshooting with. You could argue, that's more of a SQL development or SQL admin tool. You could be right, but so many of us, we do the same. We might be the admin, the SSIS person, and the developer, right? And manage the website. I don't know. The Visual Studio, we've talked about what the Visual Studio is, and the Business Intelligence Development Studio. It's a fancy marketing name. Some of this I just put in here just for completeness, really, so that you'd have it all in the PDF. Now, we create packages in SSIS, and a package is a unit of work. So when you execute, that's what we call it. When you execute the package, you're performing all of the work in the package. And a package contains tasks, and these tasks they could be anything from loading data. We're going to cover all of that in Chapter 4. You can specify that this task occurs before that task occurs as well. So again, I'm just going through some of the basic terms. Some of this may be a little rote for you, but just to make sure that somebody coming into this for maybe the first time, they have a good solid foundation for us to go on into the next chapter. So in the next video, let's come back and take a look at the rest of these terms. So I'll see you then.